They were proud creatures. They stood taller than most species in the galaxy, with long spines that ran down their backs like columns of bone. Their skin was gray and rough, like stone that had learned to walk. Their eyes were yellow and sharp, always watching, always judging. For the posture was everything. The way you stood told others who you were. A straight spine meant strength. A bent spine meant weakness. This was the oldest rule of their people, passed down through thousands of years. In the ancient times, before they had starships and space stations, there had been hunters. A weak hunter was a dead hunter, so they learned to stand tall, to never show pain, to never bend. Now they lived among the stars. They shared space stations with other species. They signed treaties and traded goods, but the old ways remained. Who could not stand tall was worth nothing. On the space station called Accord's Light, there was a place called the... This was where cubs learned to become proper members of their society. 20 young cubs lived there, all between 5 and 7 years old by human counting. Their spines had not yet fully hardened. Their bones were still soft, but they were expected to learn the ancient art of standing true. Instructor was in charge of the... He was old and stern, with a spine so straight it looked like it had been carved from metal. He had trained hundreds of cubs over his long life. He believed in the old ways with all his heart. Weakness had to be removed. Only the strong deserved to rise. Every morning the cubs lined up in the training hall. The room was cold and gray, with high ceilings and hard floors. There were no soft places to sit. There were no colors on the walls. Comfort made cubs weak, believed, so there was no comfort. Stand true, he would command, and the cubs would try. They would pull their small spines straight. They would lock their legs. They would hold their arms at their sides, and they would stay like that for hours. Their muscles would shake. Their joints would ache. Some would cry, but silently, because making noise was also weakness. Among the 20 cubs, there was one who struggled more than others. His name was, and he was the smallest of the group. His spine had a slight curve to it that he had been born with. No matter how hard he tried, he could never stand as straight as the others. His body simply would not allow it. Watched with cold eyes, he saw the small cub shaking. He saw the curve that would not straighten, and he felt disappointment. Another unsuitable one, he thought, another failure. One morning during inspection, his legs gave out. He had been standing for 3 hours. His muscles had turned to water. He collapsed onto the hard floor with a soft thud. The other cubs did not look at him. They had been trained not to. Looking at someone who fell was the same as sharing their shame. So they kept their eyes forward, their spines straight, while lay on the ground trying not to cry. Walked slowly toward the fallen cub. His footsteps echoed in the silent hall. He stopped and looked down with an expression that held no warmth. "Get up," he said. Tried, his arms pushed against the floor. His legs shook. He managed to get to his knees, then to his feet. But his spine was bent and his whole body was trembling. "Your form is broken," said. His voice was not angry. It was simply flat, like he was stating a fact about the weather. "You will never stand true. You are unsuitable for the warrior caste." Felt something break inside him that had nothing to do with his bones. He had known, somewhere deep inside, that this moment would come. But hearing it said out loud made it real. He was unsuitable. He would be sent to the lower castes. He would spend his life in the service jobs, the cleaning jobs, the jobs that no one respected. "Return to your place," said. "Continue the exercise." Walked back to his spot in the line. The other cubs still did not look at him. He was already invisible to them. He was already gone. But someone else was watching. On the observation deck above the training hall, there was a window made of thick glass. Behind that window stood a human woman. Her name was Sergeant, and she was the human liaison officer assigned to Accord's Light. Was 42 years old. She had dark brown skin and short black hair that was just starting to show gray at the edges. Her eyes were warm but tired, the eyes of someone who had seen many things in her life. She had been a soldier once, back on Earth. Now she was a diplomat, which meant she spent most of her time going to meetings and signing documents. She was not supposed to interfere with cultural practices. The treaty was very clear about that. Each species on the station followed their own ways. Humans did not tell how to raise their young and did not tell humans how to raise theirs. But had been watching for several days now. She had seen the cubs struggle. She had seen them shake and cry and fall. She had seen the way the instructors looked at the ones who failed, like they were looking at broken tools that needed to be thrown away. And she had seen the way he tried harder than anyone else. She had seen the way his small body fought against itself, trying to do something it was never built to do. She had seen him fall, and she had seen the light go out of his yellow eyes when called him unsuitable. Pressed her hand against the cold glass of the window. Down below, stood in line with the others, trying once again to hold a pose that was slowly destroying him. She was not supposed to interfere, but some rules, she thought, were made to be broken. She turned away from the window and walked toward the door. She had a request to file and a plan to make. The believed that strength meant standing tall and never bending, believed something different. Sometimes, she knew, the strongest thing you could do was bend down to help someone else stand up. She would teach them that lesson. She would teach them all, filed her request the next morning. She asked the station council for permission to observe the as part of a cultural exchange program. The request was simple and polite. She said she wanted to learn about child-raising methods. She said it would help humans understand their allies better. The council discussed it for less than an hour before approving. The members of the council were amused by the request. What could humans possibly learn from watching cubs train? Humans were soft creatures with soft spines. They bent and curved and slouched. They had no understanding of true discipline. But if the human wanted to watch and take notes, there was no harm in it. Perhaps she would learn something about strength. Perhaps she would see why they were superior. So was given access to the observation deck. She came every day and stood behind the glass window. She watched the cubs line up. She watched them stand until their bodies shook. She watched them fall and get back up and fall again. She took notes on a small electronic pad, writing down everything she saw. The instructors noticed her watching. They stood a little when they knew human eyes were on them. They wanted to show off their methods. They wanted the human to see how real warriors were made. Was especially proud during those days. He pushed the cubs harder than usual. He made them hold their poses longer. He wanted the human observer to write in her notes that training was the finest in the galaxy. For 3 days, said nothing. She just watched and wrote. The instructors began to think she was simply a quiet observer, gathering information for some human report that no one would ever read. On the 4th day, she came down from the observation deck and walked into the training hall. The cubs stopped and stared. They had never seen a human up close before, was shorter than the adult, though still taller than the cubs. Her skin was smooth and brown, not rough and gray like theirs. She moved differently too, with loose and easy steps instead of the stiff stride. Turned to face her, his yellow eyes were hard. "This is a training session," he said. "Observers remain on the deck." Nodded politely. "I understand, instructor, but I have a proposal, a cultural exchange exercise. I would like to share some human training methods with your cubs, with your permission, of course." Was silent for a moment. He did not like this human walking into his training hall, but he was also curious. Humans had a reputation for being strong fighters even with their soft spines. Their soldiers had won many battles. Perhaps there was some small wisdom in their strange ways. "What kind of exercise?" he asked. "Simple things," said. "Stretches, balance work, nothing that will interfere with your program. Consider it a gift between allies." Thought about it. If he refused, it might cause political problems. The station council wanted humans and to work together. And if the humans' methods were foolish, it would only prove that ways were better. "Very well," he said. "You may have 1 hour each day, but I will be watching." "Of course," said. She turned to face the cubs. 20 small faces looked up at her with fear in their yellow eyes. They had been taught that every adult interaction was a test. They expected her to judge them, to find them weak, to declare some of them unsuitable. Did something that made the watching instructors gasp. She sat down on the floor. Not on a chair, not on a raised platform. She lowered herself all the way down and sat cross-legged on the hard ground so that her head was now below the level of the cubs. They looked down at her with confusion. No adult had ever put themselves beneath them before. "My name is," she said in a soft voice. "I am not here to test you. I am here to show you something." The cubs did not move. They did not know what to do. Looking down at an adult felt wrong, like breaking one of the oldest rules. Stood at the back of the group. He was the smallest, and he always tried to hide himself behind the others. But from where he stood, he could see the human woman clearly. She was looking at all of them with eyes that held no judgment. Her face was relaxed. Her posture was loose. She did not look like someone who was about to sort them into worthy and unworthy. "Where I come from," said, The tallest person in the room is not always the strongest. Sometimes strength is knowing when to bend. The cubs looked at each other. This made no sense. Bending was weakness. Everyone knew that. I would like to teach you some exercises, continued. They are different from what you have learned here. They might feel strange at first, but I promise you they will help. She looked around at the small faces watching her. Then her eyes found at the back of the group. He quickly looked away, afraid of being noticed. He was unsuitable. He did not deserve attention. But smiled at him anyway. It was a small smile, gentle and warm. Had never seen an adult smile at him like that. He did not know what to do with it. "Let us begin," said, and she rose to her feet in one smooth motion. "First, I want you all to sit down, like I did, on the floor." The cubs hesitated. They looked expecting him to stop this madness. But said nothing. He simply watched with narrow eyes. Slowly, one by one, the cubs sat down on the floor. It felt strange. It felt wrong. But the human woman was sitting down too, so maybe it was allowed. "Good," said. "Now I want you to take a deep breath, fill your lungs, hold it, and then let it out slowly." She showed them how. Her chest rose and fell, her shoulders relaxed. The cubs tried to copy her. Their breathing was quick and shallow at first, the breathing of creatures who were always afraid. But slowly, with gentle coaching, it began to deepen. Breathed in, he breathed out. And for the first time in his short life, the tight knot of fear in his chest began to loosen. He did not know it yet, but everything was about to change. The weeks passed and kept her promise. Every day she came to the training hall for her 1 hour with the cubs. Every day she taught them something new. She started with stretches. She showed them how to reach their arms above their heads and pull gently. She showed them how to bend at the waist and touch their toes. She showed them how to twist their spines slowly from side to side. The instructors watched from the edges of the room. They whispered to each other with disapproval. Stretching was for the old and the sick. Warriors did not stretch. Warriors were rigid and strong. But explained that human soldiers stretched before every battle. She said that muscles that could bend were muscles that would not tear. She said that a spine that could move in all directions was stronger than a spine that could only stand still. The cubs did not fully understand, but they did the exercises anyway, and slowly something began to change. Their bodies stopped hurting so much. The constant ache in their joints started to fade. When they stood in their poses during regular training, they did not shake as badly as before. Their stances grew stronger, not weaker. Notice this? He did not like it, but he could not deny what he saw. The cubs were improving. Even the ones who had struggled before were now holding their poses longer. Then taught them something that almost caused a scandal. She taught them how to fall. "Sometimes," she told the cubs, "you will lose your balance. This is not something to fear. This is something to prepare for." She showed them how to roll when they fell, spreading the impact across their whole body instead of taking it all in one place. She showed them how to protect their heads. She showed them how to get back up quickly and smoothly. Stormed across the training hall. His yellow eyes blazed with anger. "You are teaching them to fall," he said. "You are teaching them to accept failure." Met his gaze calmly. "I am teaching them to survive failure," she said. "A warrior who knows how to fall can fight again. A warrior who does not know will shatter." "Do not fall," said. "We stand always." And when standing is not possible, when the ground shakes, when an enemy pushes them down, what then? Had no answer. He turned and walked away, but he did not stop the lessons. Something in his mind was beginning to crack, like a wall that had stood too long in the wind. As the days passed, spent more time with. She noticed that he stayed after the group sessions, practicing by himself when the others had left. His spine would never be straight, but he worked harder than anyone else. One evening, she found him in the training hall alone. He was trying to hold the standing true pose, but his body was shaking, and there were silent tears running down his gray face. Walked over and sat down next to him, not in front of him, not above him, beside him. "May I tell you something?" she asked. Did not look at her. "I am unsuitable," he said. His voice was flat, like he had said these words so many times they had lost all feeling. "You should not waste your time with me." "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" asked. Shook his head. "I see someone who works harder than anyone else in this room. I see someone whose body was not built for standing still, but who keeps trying anyway. I see strength." Finally looked at her. His yellow eyes were wet. My spine is curved, he said. I cannot fix it. Then do not try to fix it, said. Use it. She stood up and showed him a different way to hold the pose. Instead of fighting against his spine's natural curve, she taught him to work with it. She showed him how to shift his weight, how to find balance in motion instead of stillness, how to sway where others would snap. A tree that bends in the wind survives the storm, she said. A tree that refuses to bend breaks. They practiced together until the lights in the hall dimmed for the night. When finally stood in his new modified stance, he was not shaking. He was not hurting. He was steady. How do you feel? Asked. Different, said. Then after a pause, good, I feel good. Smiled, good. She spent extra hours with him after that. They would sit together in the quiet hall, and she would ask him questions that no adult had ever asked. What do you dream of becoming? She asked one night. Looked at her with surprise. Unsuitable cubs do not become anything, we serve. That is what they told you, said. I am asking what you want. Was silent for a long time. No one had ever asked him what he wanted. He did not know how to answer. But slowly, carefully, he began to speak. I want to help others, he said. The cubs who struggle like I did, I want to show them that they are not broken. Felt her heart swell with warmth. That is a beautiful dream, she said, and I think you will make it real someday. Another evening, a different cub came to with a question. Her name was, and she was bigger than, with a strong spine that had no curve. She had watched with the smaller cubs and wondered about the humans' strange ways. Why do you bend down to speak to us? Asked. Your adults could demand that we rise to meet them, but you lower yourself instead. Why? Thought about the question carefully before answering. Because children are not small adults, she said. They are growing things, and growing things need room to reach upward. If you press a weight on a young plant, it will not grow tall. It will grow twisted and weak. Considered this, but pressure makes us strong, she said. That is what the instructors teach. Some pressure, yes, agreed. Like the pressure of exercise or the pressure of learning, but there is a difference between pressure that helps growth and pressure that stops it. Do you understand? Nodded slowly. She was beginning to understand something that the instructors had never taught her. Strength was not just about standing rigid. Strength was also about knowing when to be soft. The hour ended and the cubs went back to their regular training. But something had changed in all of them. They still stood tall as the way demanded. But now they knew how to bend, how to fall, how to rise again. And the unsuitable one was beginning to stand taller than anyone had ever expected. The time of the rite of standing drew near. This was the most important ceremony in a young's life. Every cub who had trained in the would stand before the elders and prove themselves. Those who stood well would be accepted into the warrior caste, the highest and most respected level of society. Those who failed would be sorted into the lower castes to spend their lives in service and shadow. The whole station buzzed with preparation. Families cleaned their quarters and prepared their finest clothing. The ceremony hall was decorated with ancient symbols of strength and honor. Hundreds would attend to watch the cubs be judged. Felt the weight of the ceremony pressing on him. His cubs had improved greatly in the past weeks, thanks in part to the human woman's strange methods. But he was not happy about this. The improvements had come from bending, from stretching, from learning to fall. These were not the old ways. These were human ideas, soft ideas, and they had infected his. He went to the station council with a demand. The human sergeant should be barred from attending the rite of standing. This was a sacred ceremony. It was not for outside eyes. The council discussed the matter for a long time. Some members thought was being too strict. The human had helped the cubs improve. Should she not be allowed to see the results of her work? But others agreed with the old instructor. The rite was ancient and pure. It should not be watched by soft-spined aliens who did not understand its meaning. In the end, the council voted to bar from the ceremony. She accepted the decision with grace. She had known this might happen. They were proud people, and she had already pushed against their traditions more than most would allow. But when she told the cubs she would not be there to watch them, she saw the fear in their eyes. She had become someone they trusted, someone who believed in them. Without her there, they felt alone again. You do not need me there, she told them. Everything I have taught you is inside you now. It will not disappear because I am not in the room. You are ready. The cubs tried to believe her, but especially felt a cold weight settle in his chest. The one adult who had ever seen him as something more than unsuitable would not be there when he needed her most. The night before the rite walked through the station alone. His mind was troubled. He had trained cubs for decades. He had always believed in the old ways, but now doubt had crept into his thoughts like water seeping through cracks in stone. He found himself walking toward the training hall, though he did not know why. When he arrived, he stopped in the doorway and watched in silence. Was there, practicing by himself in the dim light. The small cub moved through the stances one by one, but he was not holding them the way he had taught. He was moving differently, flowing from one position to the next like water over rocks. His spine curved, but his body was balanced. His movements were smooth and controlled. He looked strong, truly strong. Not the brittle strength of a rod that would snap under pressure, but the deep strength of a river that could wear away mountains. Stepped into the hall, his footsteps echoed and stopped moving. The small cub turned to face his instructor, and there was no fear in his yellow eyes. There was only calm. "The human taught you this," said. Straightened his spine as much as it would go. "Yes," he said, "she taught me many things." "Such as?" Thought for a moment before answering. "She taught me that my spine is not my worth. She taught me that I can stand tall without being stiff. She taught me that someone strong once bent down to help me rise, and that made all the difference." Felt something shift inside his chest. It was an unfamiliar feeling, one he had not experienced in many years. It took him a moment to recognize it. Shame. He had looked at this cub and seen only failure. He had declared unsuitable without ever trying to understand why he struggled. He had measured the boy against a single standard and found him lacking, never considering that there might be other ways to be strong. The human had done what he should have done. She had looked at and seen potential instead of problems. She had bent down to help him instead of standing above him in judgment. "Return to your quarters," said, his voice strange and quiet. "You need rest before the rite." Bowed and walked past him toward the door. He stopped just before leaving and looked back at his instructor. "Sergeant told me something once," he said. "She said that growing things need room to reach upward. Maybe that is true for old things too." Then he was gone and was alone in the empty hall. He stood there for a long time, thinking about everything he had believed and everything he might have been wrong about. The old ways had made the strong, yes, but had they also made them blind? Had they been so focused on standing rigid that they forgot how to bend? Late that night, went his quarters. He stood outside her door for several minutes before he found the courage to knock. She opened the door and looked at him with surprise. They had not spoken privately since their argument about teaching the cubs to fall. "Instructor," she said, "can I help you?" Did not apologize, but he asked a question, and for him that was even harder. "What else have we been teaching wrong?" Looked at him for a long moment. She saw the struggle in his yellow eyes, the walls beginning to crack after so many years of standing firm. She stepped aside and invited him in. They talked until the light of the artificial dawn began to glow through the station's windows. She told him about human children, about how they were raised with encouragement instead of judgment. She told him about the human belief that every child had value, that no one was ever truly unsuitable. When finally left, he was not the same person who had entered. Something inside him had changed. The walls had cracked, and new light was beginning to shine through. He did not know yet what he would do with this new understanding, but he knew that after the rite of standing, things in the would be different. They would have to be. The ceremony hall was filled with hundreds of. They sat in tall chairs arranged in rising rows so that everyone could see the platform at the center of the room. The elders sat in the front row, their ancient spines as straight as the traditions they protected. Behind them sat the families, the warriors, the craftspeople, all gathered to watch the cubs prove their worth. The light in the hall was bright and white, leaving no shadows where weakness could hide. The air smelled of incense that the burned during sacred ceremonies. Everything was still and quiet, waiting. 20 cubs stood in a line at the edge of the platform. They wore simple gray robes, the traditional clothing of those who had not yet earned their place. Their yellow eyes looked out at the crowd with fear and hope mixed together. Stood at the end of the line. He was the smallest, as always, but he did not try to hide himself behind the others this time. He stood where he was and looked straight ahead. High above the hall, on a maintenance balcony that was not meant for visitors, Sergeant watched through a small window. She had been officially barred from the ceremony, but a kind engineer had shown her this hidden spot where she could see without being seen. She pressed her hand against the cold metal wall and watched the cubs she had come to care for. The ceremony began. An elder rose from his seat and spoke words in the old language, words that had been spoken for thousands of years. He called upon the spirits of ancient hunters, the first ones who had learned to stand tall against the dangers of their world. Then the first cub stepped onto the platform. Her name was the one who had asked about why humans bent down to speak to children. She walked to the center of the platform and took her stance. Her spine was straight and strong. Her arms were steady at her sides. She held the pose without shaking, without moving, for the full count of 100 heartbeats. The elders nodded their approval. Had passed. She stepped off the platform, and her family made sounds of pride and joy. One by one, the cubs took their turns. Most passed. A few struggled, their young bodies shaking under the pressure. 2 fell before the count was finished and were led away in silence, their futures now limited to the lower castes. Then it was turn. The hall grew quieter somehow, though it had already been quiet. Everyone knew about the curved spine cub, the one who had been declared unsuitable. They expected him to fail. Some had come specifically to watch it happen. Walked to the center of the platform. His steps were slow and careful. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him, judging him, waiting for him to prove what they already believed, that he was weak, that he was broken, that he did not belong. He stopped at the center and closed his eyes for a moment. In his mind, he heard's voice. A tree that bends in the wind survives the storm. He opened his eyes and began. He did not start in the traditional way, with his spine snapping straight all at once. Instead, he began low, almost crouched, like a seed just beginning to push through soil. The crowd murmured in confusion. This was not the proper form. This was not how the stance was supposed to begin. But was not finished. Slowly, deliberately, he began to rise. His spine curved into position like water finding its natural path. His weight shifted smoothly from one leg to the other. His arms floated up to their proper places at his sides. Every movement flowed into the next, a continuous dance of balance and control. When he reached full height, he was motionless. His body was still. His spine was curved, yes, but his form was perfect in its own way. He was not fighting against himself. He was working with himself with all the strength and flexibility that had taught him to find. The count began, 10 heartbeats, 20, 50. Did not shake, he did not sway. He stood like a mountain that had learned to breathe. 80 heartbeats, 90. The crowd was completely silent now. Even the elders leaned forward in their seats, watching with wide eyes. 100 heartbeats. The count was finished, but did not move. He kept standing. 110, 120. He was making a point now, showing everyone what the unsuitable cub could do when someone believed in him. Finally, after 150 heartbeats, he released the pose. He did it the way had taught him, flowing down out of the stance as smoothly as he had flowed into it. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then something happened that had never happened in the history of the rite of standing. The crowd began to hum. It was a low sound, a deep vibration that they made to show respect. One voice started it, then another joined, then another, until the whole hall was filled with the sound. It washed over like a warm wave, and he felt tears begin to form in his yellow eyes. They were acknowledging him, not as unsuitable, not as broken, but as one of them, as someone who had earned his place. Up on the hidden balcony, wiped tears from her own eyes. Looked up, somehow knowing exactly where she was watching from. He could not smile because faces were not built for smiling. But she saw it anyway in the way his eyes brightened, in the way he stood just a little taller. The ceremony continued after that, but nothing else mattered as much. Had done what everyone thought was impossible. He had proved that there was more than one way to stand tall. Later, when the ceremony was over and the crowds had gone home, found in the corridor outside the hall. She was waiting for him, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed and a smile on her face. "You were watching," he said. "I was," she admitted. "I could not stay away." Stood before her as tall as his small frame would allow. "Sergeant," he said formally, "I have a question." "You can call me," she said, "and you can always ask me anything." "Why did you help me?" The question poured out of him, a question he had held inside for weeks. "I was nothing, I was unsuitable, your people owed us nothing, you gained nothing by teaching me, so why?" looked at him for a long moment. Then she did what she had always done. She bent down, lowering herself to his level so that their eyes could meet without him having to look up. "Because where I come from," she said softly, "we do not see unsuitable, we see becoming. Every child is becoming something. They just need someone to help them find what that something is." She reached out and gently adjusted his shoulder, a tiny correction to his posture. The same small gesture she had made 100 times during their lessons. "Everyone deserves someone who will bend down to help them stand tall," she said. "Today, I bent down for you. Someday you will bend down for someone else. That is how it works. That is how the universe becomes kinder, one small act at a time." Was quiet for a moment, thinking about her words. Then he spoke. "I would like to learn more human lessons, if you would teach me." Smiled, "I would like that too." They stood together in the corridor, the tall human and the small, and for a moment the differences between them did not matter at all. Behind them in the shadows of a doorway watched. He had seen everything, the ceremony, the unprecedented response from the crowd, and now this quiet moment between two beings from different worlds who had somehow found common ground. He said nothing. He simply turned and walked back toward The next morning, when the new group of cubs gathered for their first day of training, did something that had never been done before in all the generations of He sat down among them, on the floor, below their eye level. The cubs stared at him in shock. They did not know what to make of this. An instructor on the ground, it was unheard of. "Tell me," said, his voice softer than it had ever been, "what do you dream of becoming?" The cubs looked at each other in confusion. No one had ever asked them that question. No one had ever cared what they wanted. But slowly, hesitantly, they began to answer. And listened to each one, really listened, for the first time in his long life. Somewhere on the station smiled. She did not know what was happening in them, but she could feel it somehow. Something had shifted, something had changed. The cubs would still learn to stand tall. That part of tradition would never fade. But now they would also learn something else. They would learn that strength came in many forms, that bending was not weakness, that the tallest person in the room was not always the one standing And they would learn that sometimes the kindest thing a strong person could do was bend down to help a small silhouette stand tall.